and welcome to our panel today. We've got an exciting group. Thank you very much to Generali for hosting us and for Diversity for getting it organized as well. For those of you who don't know or haven't seen it, we have Diversity's new issue is focused on LGBT plus safe zone. And this activity is in launch and in support and in discussion of this. So please do go out and read the magazine. It's full of interesting articles. But before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to Kenny Jaman. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Kenny Jamanakunit, who is the CEO of Generali Life Assurance in Thailand. Take it away, Kenny.
Hi, Rose, and everyone. Thank you for having me to open this. So first of all, welcome everyone again to join this session. It's an exciting day for all of us to continue our progress toward our LGBTQI agenda in Generali. Why are we hosting this event? The LGBTQI inclusion journey at Generali started just last year. So it's only been a year. Even though we are celebrating 190 years of Generali this year, we consider a very young organization when we're talking about LGBTQI. So the agenda is being supported by our group D&I Council. We have done a lot in the past 1 year to get to where we are, and yet we are just scratching the surface. So today is a good opportunity that we are very honored to host this very prestigious panel with the company like Barilla, Hogan Lovells, and a lot of experts from the LGBTQI promoters who have a very long experience in this field. So I think we can learn a lot from today's session, and why this matter really matter to us. Why is it so important to us? I mean, again, we are insurance company. At Generali, the people is the most important asset to us. And so we're not just doing this because it's part of important policy that we have, or because it makes sense business-wise, but also we ambitiously want to make Generali to be the place for all diversity to work, to prosper, and to follow their dreams to the fullest. One of our core value at Generali is that we value our people. So we will make this value real for everyone by making Generali a safe zone that our people thrive. I myself personally am an ally, and I take great advantage of being a CEO of my organization and making Generali Thailand a safe zone for my people. Yet, I'm pretty sure today I will benefit from the session, and I'm looking forward to bring those new knowledge and improve the community that I live in and I help to make it a better place. Generali is our place. Thank you. Back to you, Ross.
Okay, I feel like I'm in a talk show with all this coordination. Thank you, Kenny, and thanks for that generous introduction. I think we all here are here because we are all in our own way, individually and as organizations, trying to grapple with what is a safe zone, what does it mean, and as you said, we do want to make our environment safe, where everyone of our employees, our colleagues, our friends, our relatives, everyone in our community can flourish. So thank you for that. I realize I didn't introduce myself. My name is Rose Karthalari. I'm a consultant. I work with leaders and leadership. And today I am moderating this event for Diversity, on whose advisory board I sit. So just to give you some context. And as Kenny said, we have a really great panel. We have a variety of opinions and perspectives, and also a lot of different ways that a single issue can be looked at, because it is multifaceted. So I would like to start with Igor Suran, who's the executive director of Parks Libere Uguali, based in Italy. Hi, Igor, how are you? I was wondering if you could start us off with a few definitions. So we talk about the LGBT safe zone. We've certainly in Europe, we've read about it in the papers. We've also read about the LGBT free zones in certain countries. Could you take us through some of the concepts? What is it? Why do we need it? What's happening?
Thank you, Rose. Buongiorno, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you around the globe. It is a great pleasure and honor to be part of this distinguished panel, as Kenny said. And thank you, Rose and Diversity for the invitation. Rose, you're asking me how I would define a safe zone. I would define the safe zone as an environment, in this case, a workplace, as we're in the business environment, in which I can really be my true, authentic self. Rose, I do, and all of you do. Every morning, I look at myself in the mirror and I see who I am. I see my life in the reflection, who I am, what I am. And then as I step out of my home and walk into my office, I would like to be able to be the person that I see in the mirror in the morning, to be my authentic self, because only then will I be in the position to express to the full extent my professional aspirations, my professional potential, and precisely that is the reason why you, my employee, hired me in the first place. We all have things that we do not share with the others. We all have secrets, small or big, in our closets. But when the secret is, and that is the topic of our conversation today, LGBT plus, when my secret is that I am a lesbian woman or a gay man or a bisexual or transgender man and woman, I really find it hard, trust me, Rose, I find it hard to keep it a secret in the closet. I know that many people still say it's okay to be gay, but let him be gay at home in privacy. Yes, as if I could switch off my computer, clean the table after dinner, and then be gay for the 2 hours before going to bed, as if I could. As if I, a straight man, were only straight from after dinner until bedtime. No, I am straight from the moment that I wake up in the morning until the moment I wake up the next day. All the time, because that is my life. And that is why, Rose, I, a gay man, I'm gay from when I wake up in the morning until the moment I wake up the next day, because it is my life. Our sexual orientation and our gender identity and expression, that is what we're talking about. That is part of our lives, and it's part of my life too. And that is something that we have become collectively and individually aware of. We have become aware that we cannot confine our sexual orientation and our gender identity to the 2 hours behind the closed doors before bedtime. And we employers have become aware that it has to be part of our inclusion narrative in any workplace. But then, it's fine. But all my life, I have had to be cautious, I, a gay man, because anytime I try to speak about my being gay or lesbian or transgender, I was always made feel uncomfortable, or to put it bluntly, Rose, I have been made shut up, and not always in pleasant ways, often in violent ways. And that is why I'm afraid to speak up now. And even though it is very difficult to keep a secret as big as my life in my closet of secrets, I sometimes almost prefer keeping it a secret to risking what I did risk in the past. I need to feel safe in order to come out of the closet, coming out of the closet. I need to feel safe, and I do not want to wear a mask under which I hide. And I know, Rose, that it is not elegant to speak about masks in this period, but we all know how hard it is to be behind a mask for whatever reason. So which is the safety that I need in order to come out? And who can create that safe zone? Well, I'm in the closet, Rose. I have no voice, no visibility. You don't hear me, you don't see me, as if I did not exist. I cannot do much. I need you, all of you who are out in the free, out in the open, to do something to make this zone safe for me to exit and to come out. And how can you do that? On one side, Rose, you have to say it clearly. You have to say it very clearly that I'm welcome to be who I am. Perhaps even better, you have to put it down in written. It has to be there to stay in your statutes, in your code of behavior, in your set of corporate values. You have to state it, you have to. And then you have to see if there is any other internal norm, protocol, benefit, procedure that has to reflect what you've just stated. Because inclusion, Rose, as we all know, is the ability to respond to the needs that people have. Needs that stem from who I am, from what I see in the mirror. But you barely know me. You barely know that I exist. How can I expect you to know what I need? So please let me out of the closet so that I can tell you and I will help you understand what I need for you to be inclusive. And I also know, Rose, that not everybody will be comfortable with me around. I know that. So I'm asking you to please do something to help those people who would be uncomfortable not to be uncomfortable. Help them understand who I am and why I should be able to be who I am, even if their lives have brought them to think that I should keep it in private. Because you as an employer, Rose, you cannot choose to make me feel better and at the same time risk that many other people fall out of their comfort zone. And that part, for me, is the other part of this equation, this convergence between the norms and the culture. And that convergence will certainly help create a safe zone in which I will be free and authentic, and all of you will be free and authentic, because it's good for all of us. Because, Rose, what we have to understand, and that will come out as the result of our great conversation today, we are all involved. We are all involved. It's good for all of us. The free zone is good for all of us. Yeah. Thank you, Rose.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. What you said about having, you know, a coalition. So it's not just helping those who might be uncomfortable speaking and turning up and showing up as who they really are, but also making sure that everybody else is also uncomfortable. I think the words you use were making the uncomfortable comfortable, because it's a matter of expanding. You talked about cultures, and actually I would like to go to our next speaker who has worked for, I know, the World Bank. He is now the managing director of Out Leadership, Fabrice Oudard. Hi, Fabrice.
Hi, how are you, Rose?
Good. So we've heard Igor talk about this issue of culture and differences in culture. So could you give us a little bit of a global perspective in terms of, you know, how does the focus and the spotlight on LGBT rights and LGBT community rights and awareness and voice and all of those things come up, and specifically, you know, with respect to human rights? I know you've talked a lot about LGBT rights are human rights. So how do you see this playing around about from on a global perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rose. I am a Frenchman, so I'm horribly negative, particularly early in the morning. So sometimes, you know, I look at the map and I'm like, the situation of LGBT people is difficult. There is very little progress. The truth is that there has been tremendous progress, unexpected progress. And, you know, as a gay man in my lifetime, I have seen things that I could never imagine. You know, if as an example, I was a little bit better at dating, I could be married to another man. And I can tell you something, when I came out when I was 20 years old, you know, 23 years ago, I never imagined that I could get married to a man. And then the other thing is that I'm raising two little boys that are the joy of my life. And those two little boys go to school, and everybody is very supportive of the fact that they have two dads. And that is another thing I never expected. So, you know, of course, the United States is kind of at the forefront of progress, particularly for homosexuals. But the truth is that throughout the world, you see some level of progress. But in fact, that progress is kind of a double-edged sword, because on one hand, you know, it's great that LGBT people can live a life of dignity and opportunity in certain places of the world. But on the other hand, what it creates for the people that live in the vast majority of the world, which is where same-sex relationships are still either criminalized or stigmatized, those people, they know that the only thing that stands between them and a life of dignity and opportunity is a plane ticket. And that's very hard. You know, you cannot tell a lesbian in a medium city in Tunisia, oh, don't worry, your life is going to be very mediocre and you won't be able to live with the person you love. But in 2 generations, there will be another lesbian that will be living a life of dignity. You cannot say that. It's kind of a cruel thing to say. Now, I'll tell you, we are facing a very difficult situation, particularly in Europe, because some politicians have been using LGBTQ plus people to gain votes. And the way they have done that is that they have opposed a decadent West, supportive of LGBTQ plus people, to a family and tradition East. Well, that's the craziest thing, because I can tell you something is that as someone who spends a lot of time with lesbian, gay men, and trans people, I can tell you that there is nothing we love more than family and tradition. In fact, you know, you can count on a gay man in the United States to celebrate Christmas as if there was no tomorrow. So it is a very artificial distinction that those politicians make. But unfortunately, it has been spreading because, as you know, the oldest politician trick is to use a minority that is already kind of stigmatized and say, no, don't look at my terrible economic results, or don't look at the unhappiness that our lifestyle is leading to. No, look at the gay people. They are the reason why you're miserable. And so, you know, we have to constantly fight that narrative. And you know, I'm happy to see that increasingly there is voices that say, you know, if you are a politician and if you're using the suffering of LGBTQ plus people to get elected, we will make you pay a high price. And that's exactly the way we should go about it. So to summarize my intervention, Rose, I will say, first of all, don't be French, be optimistic. The truth is that it has never been a better time to be LGBT. But our fight is far from over. The vast majority of LGBT people live short and brutish life where they get kicked out of places of worship, where they get kicked out of their family, where they get stigmatized in their community. And this is unacceptable in 2021. So, you know, in many ways, as you mentioned, this is a human rights issue before everything else. And you know, I'm delighted to be with activists like Pavel today that are leading the charge in some of the hardest places when it comes to that fight for the human rights of LGBT people.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, absolutely. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic, and the fight is not over. Both are true at the same time. And part of that is because we live in a world where realities and countries and contexts are so different, right? We have different traditions, we have different cultures. And I actually want to move the conversation a little bit to talk about the corporate experience in a variety of countries. And I wanted to just put this out there. Doris, who will be speaking next, Doris Pizarro, who's a diversity and inclusion manager of Generali, shared with me this lovely model that I believe was developed by the Stonewall organization that talks about the kinds of approaches organizations can have when it comes to LGBT inclusion, right? So you can be, one is called When in Rome. Of course, living in Italy, I resonate with that. So when in Rome, you do as the Romans do, right? You adhere to the norms of the place. Or the other strategy is to be the embassy, where you implement and enforce protective policies, you protect your employees, you're very supportive of all of your diverse communities, including LGBT, and you take measures while in the office, while in the embassy. And then we've got the advocacy role, which support activism both internally and externally. So what's interesting today is we've got a group of organizations that sort of span the spectrum that are doing really interesting things in each of these areas. So I would like to start with you, Doris, because I know Generali is fairly new. You've just started this process a year ago, if I remember correctly. So what have been your key challenges? What have been your lessons learned? And what have been some of your accomplishments in this last year?
Thank you, Rose. Thanks for this question. Actually, it's a very interesting topic because obviously it was a dilemma when we started, right? Where should we place ourselves? Is it the first step, the second step, the third step? I think that although we started only 1 year ago, we have actually gone a long way. Just one word before I talk only about LGBT, just one word on our group diversity and inclusion journey. We actually started to work on diversity and inclusion a few years ago, okay? And we built a solid strategy. We built also solid governance. And Kenny, who is hosting this this panel today, is one of the Diversity and Inclusion Council members and has been with us from the very beginning, which is key. It's fundamental working in a corporation, right? To have the leaders supporting you when you are, you know, in terms of diversity and inclusion. And as a matter of fact, we've always placed, let's say, positioned it as a strategic key asset for our group. We have worked on 4 priorities, mainly gender, generations, culture, and inclusion. And we have also started to progress, to monitor our progress and to our commitments through a diversity and inclusion index. So this is, you know, just to give you the overarching framework. As I said, inclusion is one of the key pillars, and inclusion means investing on, let's say, each individual. It means that you as an organization create an environment where every single person is respected and is valued. And this is so important if you think about the raison d'etre of our group, right? As Kenny said, we are celebrating our 190th birthday this year as a group. And the purpose of this group is to enable people to shape a safer future by caring for their lives and their dreams. So obviously, you know, it's what inspires us every single day. So just as we worked on, we committed on breaking the glass ceiling when we talk about gender diversity. I know that, Rose, you do a lot of work on this, so you know what I'm talking about. We also felt that there was a need to open the glass closet, right? And I heard Igor before referring to the closet. For, I am sure the panel here are all familiar with this book, but for those who are not and are following us, I invite them to take a look at a book that was written a few years ago by Lord John Brown, former chief executive of BP, which is entitled The Glass Closet, Why Coming Out is Good for Business. So we said, okay, this is what we want to do. We want to openly discuss about this glass closet, about the invisible barriers that prevent the people that identify as LGBTQI+ from receiving certain aspects of recognition in the workplace and from feeling comfortable in being themselves in this workplace. So what did we do? We launched a call to action to our diversity and inclusion community that was back at the end of 2019. And we said, you know, help us get this topic out of the closet. And we had a huge number of persons that came to us and said, I want to do it. I want to be in this. And just before the pandemic, we were able to gather in Milan about 35 people representing all the business units in our group. And so this means almost the whole world because we are located everywhere. And we looked at, you know, evidences on LGBT invisible barriers. We looked at the ethical imperative. We looked at the business imperative. We looked at the main challenges that the LGBT community faces. That was the first move, right? That first move allowed us, after 3 months, to come up with a strategic approach on LGBT. So we embraced the United Nations LGBTQI standards, and we launched a plan that is based on 6 different priorities. The first one is awareness. So we do work on with campaigns and training in order to, you know, take this topic out of the closet for the whole organization. The second one is HR policies. The third one is creating a global network of our LGBT allies. Working on the brand is the fourth stream. Measuring is another important priority. So we want to measure the inclusion of our LGBT people, and then we're working on products. So this was, you know, from that very first moment in 2019, we were able to put, let's say, to bring this topic to up, let's say, as on the agenda. and to make a strategic plan on it. And we are working on it. So I think it was, mainly addressing this at group level that we started with, ignited also the movement at local level. And now locally, all the business units are implementing plans and taking actions in order to protect and, to be more inclusive towards LGBTQI people.
Yeah, great. Absolutely, and it sounds like you're hitting the key elements of getting your priorities, working on the systems, and then building at the much more granular human level, building the habits. Absolutely, and I want to now move to Kristen Anderson, who's the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Barilla. Kristen, I know Barilla has been on this journey for quite a while, and you've had some ups and downs, and I know there was a big incident that caused further movement. But above it all, the driver has really been a focus on making sure that your employees feel included and feel part of something bigger and part of this organization. So could you share how your employee well-being, how do you, the inclusion of your employees, how does this play out as you operate in a variety of cultures, a variety of environments that is not always supportive of all of your environments? Of all of your employees.
Thanks, Rose, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Yes, I think many people know Barilla, so I'm not going to take the time to go through Barilla, but I'm an American here in Italy, working for the CEO of Barilla. We're an Italian family-owned company, 8,500 employees, about half in Italy, but the rest around the world. So your question about how did Barilla many years ago, so we're saying almost 8 years ago, start on this very, very concerted and committed effort to promote and include more people in different points of view everywhere in the world. The first thing I think you need is leadership commitment. So as I said, the whole D&I organization was designed to report to the CEO. So it says a very clear statement to the organization that this is not one function's job, this is everyone's job of inclusion. We say that diversity is not everyone's job because if you're a hiring manager, you may say, I can't affect the diversity of my team. Okay, but inclusion is everyone's job, every single person at the company. So our goal is to make every one of our offices and factories around the world a safe zone. And Igor talked a lot about safe zone, a safe zone where people can bring their authentic selves to work. And we feel that this will only benefit the company even further in the future. It's been extremely beneficial during our COVID crisis to connect people, to allow us to continue to keep people safe and in well-being during very difficult time. So again, you need leadership commitment, one. The second is you need to engage employees all around the world in this culture change of more inclusion. I think you asked, how do we do this in different countries and different cultures? We did this via employee resource groups. I think Doris mentioned them. These are key driver of change. And we're proud to say that we have more than 1,300 employees in our employee resource groups. For our population, it's quite substantial. Wow. We have employee resource groups everywhere in the world, in Russia, in Turkey, in Dubai, and many in Italy and America. And it was a journey because you cannot assume that people know what these groups are and the benefits to themselves, either as a member of the community or as an ally. And most of our employee resource group members start as allies, because that's another element of making a safe zone. You need to make a community in which people can feel comfortable bringing their authentic self to work, and then expand that community. So we have our employee resource group called Voce, which I have to say Igor and the Parks organization was hugely instrumental in helping us form, especially in Italy, or in cultures where it's just not so common to form these ally groups. And now Voce is our biggest ERG. We have Voce, we have more than 300 members of Voce around the world. And I'm really happy to say our Turkish colleagues just formed a Voce. So can you imagine, in Turkey, wow, in our factory, in 3 hours from Istanbul, we have a Voce for LGBTQ inclusion plus allies. And this ends up making the zone safe for everyone and then expanding it. So pretty soon people bring their authentic selves to work. As Igor said, your authentic self is not just the time after dinner before you go to sleep. It's your whole day. And we know, and the studies show, that when people have to cover all day long at work, they're 50% less productive. So, and I always challenge people, try it. Try sometime to spend your whole work week not mentioning a single thing about your personal life. So it is not a conversation that's only at home. It is ability for employees to be impactful in the work. And then people can start outside of the voce safe zone, start talking about their authentic self in other contexts. And we were really, we have ERG days, and we have the CEO sponsor ERGs, executive sponsors. Our CEO has ERG breakfast every time he visits, and now virtually visits a country, he has a meeting with ERG. So this is a way to value the work the ERGs are doing and continue to do, and to continue to expand our ERGs around the world. Lastly, I would say, workplaces that work for LGBTQ colleagues work for everyone. Workplaces that work for women work for everyone. So, whatever the underrepresented group, if you can make your workplace safe and welcoming and authentic for people with differences, then you honestly can make your whole entire culture change, and that's a benefit for business. It's not only the right thing to do, it's a real big benefit for business.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think you've hit it right on the head. One of the things that we've all been hearing when it comes to Barilla is how involved leadership is in driving it and making it important for everybody to give voice, to give share of voice and space to the different ERG groups, and I think that's critical. In fact, this is a perfect segue to our next speaker, who is Alexei Kozlov. He's with Hogan Lovells. He's the Systems Services Manager, but he's also the CE Pride and co-chair for the organization. And just launching off from the discussion we've been having, Alexei, first of all, welcome. I know that the ERG at Hogan Lovells has been very active, both internally, but even more importantly, externally, and that the ERG has been very involved in creating a network and starting out to reach out with different advocacy groups locally in the countries that you're in, and in countries even that were more culturally traditional with respect to LGBT acceptance. Could you tell us a little bit about that and sort of how that evolved and about the work that you do?
Sure. Thank you very much, Rose. Hi, everyone. It's really great pleasure to be here sharing this panel with such amazing and passionate people. And yes, so as you mentioned, I'm co-chairing a network for LGBT plus employees and straight allies at Hogan Lovells. We're a global law firm. And of course, as for any global business, as just Kristen mentioned, we face the same dilemma, and we operate in more than 40 offices all around the globe. So how do we achieve the right balance, between our commitment to global values and putting them into local context and locations where we operate? And when we started this network several years ago, my personal challenge was Russia, of course, in Europe. And the first impulse, I must say, was just to drop the idea whatsoever. But then I'm so glad that we didn't do this, because we're quite active in Russia right now, and more than 30% of our office population are members of this network, which I think it's an amazing result. But back then, when we were in the office thinking about how we approach this, how we tackle this, how do we go beyond just a policy on a paper or a checked box? How do we start this thing? And the idea was to break the ice, with some sort of an external event, to invite external speaker. So we reached out to Human Rights Campaign, which is our pro bono client, global client, and this is the largest human rights organizations concerned with LGBT in the US. And we flew over the director of global to Moscow, and we held this event physically in Moscow with a live broadcast of the rest of the network. And of course, right now, in the era of Zoom conferences and stuff, so it might sound like a little bit trivial, but back then it was really some sort of the original format to have this event physically in Moscow, to reinforce our commitment, taking pride in our people's differences no matter where we operate, but in the same time, to connect everyone. And for us as well was some sort of security measure in talking about creating a safe zone, because quite honestly, I had no idea what to expect, what reaction might be shown, in Moscow, in our premises. But Ty, the speaker, was really great guy, and he said, I'm never afraid of a tough crowd, so no problem, so far away with any questions you want to ask. So we started this conversation about just general terminology, why it's important, what means this, why everyone should think about this, doing this, etc., etc. And it went very well. And we thought, why wouldn't we follow up and do more events with other human rights organizations? Because we're a law firm and we're interested in law and human rights, of course. And we did. So the network started to grow. And then we decided, why wouldn't we, do something fun? So, for example, we launched this annual tradition to celebrate Halloween for the Pride Plus members, and you know how people like to dress up, to have fun, hang out, and people know that it's really fun to hang out with us. And Moscow is famous for its nightlife, etc., etc. So I really missed this kind of events, although based in New York, but back then, when we all could travel. So it started to grow, as I said, but then we decided, you know what, we hadn't forget about local context. So because it's all like glamorous, being a global firm and external speakers, etc., but why couldn't we attach some local context to it? So we reached out to local human rights organizations that operate in Moscow on the ground. For example, our pro bono client is Moscow Community Center. They are amazing people that literally saving lives. So, for example, they help people escape Chechnya, this notorious region of Russia where LGBT plus are being killed brutally, even today, at the same moment I'm speaking to you. And their stories were really emotional, and they helped us to attach, human face to real story. And I think it's very important when you hear it from people who live in the same country, speak the same language, have the same problem, lives in the same city as you do, and people normally really willing to help. They need to understand, how to do this. What would be the most efficient way to help? And people are mostly good. So that's why I think we want even more members for our network. We did, for example, with them a workshop on for transgender people on the employment law issues, for example, how to protect themselves from unlawful dismissal or harassment at work, especially during transition period, etc., etc. Right now, just a month ago, the network in Moscow themselves, they had an event on healthcare issue for transgender people. So I couldn't be really more proud of the work that people are doing there. And I can say we're no less active in Russia than, for example, in places we've been traditionally active, like Italy or Germany. And I think it's just an amazing result. And I can go on like this forever, of course, but being conscious of time.
No, we could listen. All of you have such fascinating stories and perspectives and journeys, and I think this is one of the things that Generali really wanted to hear, and diversity also, pushes. It's just there's not just one way to do things, and environments are different, and organizations are different. So, it's great. We'll come back to you in the second round. I would like to, we focus right now so much on larger organizations and global organizations. I would like to actually move now to our next speaker, Pavel Subert, who's the founder of East Meets West, which is he'll tell you all about the organization. And I was hoping, Pavel, that you could share with us what East Meets West is, and what was the need that drove you to create this organization, and perhaps share with us some of the difficulties that you faced, and how as you dealt with the difficulties and the needs changed, how does the organization evolve, and what are you doing now to inspire and empower? Because I know the journey has changed for you over time.
Thank you, Rose, and it's a great pleasure for me to be part of the panel, and and thank you also for inviting us as a small NGO, small organization, and perhaps just a word about East Meets West. Well, it goes back to 2013, and me and my co-founder Ludo Swinen, we simply had an idea to bring people together, to connect them, to give them some kind of empowerment, and so that they leave with inspiration. And why? Because we felt that we actually live quite a safe life, because we both were living in Austria, in Vienna, and this is really a safe place. And we really wanted to do something for the countries around us, so for the Central and Eastern Europe. So what it seemed to be a kind of simple idea suddenly developed over the few years into quite a large network of LGBTIQ professionals, especially from the CEE countries. And our work, well, basically we contribute to the social change on different levels. We work with NGOs, we work with corporates, but we also work with small businesses or the LGBTIQ business owners. But on all of these basically dimensions, there is one thing which kind of is always there, and it's about role models. And we at East Meets West, we believe in role models. We believe that they are super important, not only for a community, because the community has somebody to kind of aspire towards or somebody to relate to. But it's also about the whole society, because with role models, we can also show the right picture of the LGBTIQ community. And personally, me, I was born in Czech Republic a few years ago. No, but in Czech Republic, when I was young, there were no role models, right? The only thing what I saw that times it was Czechoslovakia. It was only basically role models in terms of dark suits and really gray colors. But I had nobody to kind of look at. This is how LGBTIQ person outed can be. So I didn't have this privilege. And similar for Ludov. So Ludov was born in Belgium. So comparing to me as an ex-communist, he's more the bourgeois part of East Meets West. But even there, I mean, for him, he also didn't have any role models. And this is something where we really would like to also move forward to keep bringing, so to finding, bringing, and supporting role models. Is it always easy? Well, I mean, Rose, you ask about the challenges, the difficulties. I mean, I would name two. I mean, one is somehow our internal challenge. East Meets West is still a very small, actually a two-person organization. It has also many advantages because we can react very fast, but it's very much about how do we keep our motivation, right? So what kind of keeps us running further? And when we always finish either our conference or when we finish event, when we see suddenly that people are talking, people are connected, people are inspired, and they're actually taking own initiatives and bringing it back to the local countries, this is what actually moves us further. And this is what gives us the energy to go forward. And I think this also kind of demonstrates that even one or two people can make a change and can make their contribution. And the second thing what I wanted to mention as a challenge, obviously, these are all of the roadblocks which we have in CEE, so in our home region, Central and Eastern Europe. And Fabrice already mentioned it at the beginning, that there is actually quite some negative talk about LGBTIQ community by public figures, by also like government representatives. And this goes on the top of certain rollbacks. And naming two countries which once were quite well progressing, Hungary and Poland. Poland already was mentioned with the LGBTI free zones. I mean, this is something which is already established since 2019. There are now around 100 so-called LGBT free zones where there is no space for ideology, how they call it. In other words, this is actually a place where LGBTI people are not welcome, and these are scattered around Poland. A second country which I mentioned is Hungary. I mean, also it was actually progressing quite well until the moment when last year, besides other things, also they start discussing the ban on legal gender recognition. So there was this famous Article 33 where it actually does not allow trans and intersex people to change their gender in official documents, being it in ID document, being it in passport. Fortunately, there are also now running legal cases at the court which are actually trying to go back to the right way. And the final, which happened in Hungary close to end of the year, which was on the same-sex adoption ban. So these things obviously also for us as an NGO are huge blockers, but I think together also with all of our supporters, we are able to make a progress. And maybe to finish this, again, a kind of contribution what actually each of us can do. Me, Ludov, what we decided for 2021, as we run every year a conference, we could do it in Vienna, from Vienna, also online, but we wanted also to make a statement. And the statement is that we will set up an online studio in Poland and we will broadcast from Poland. And in this way, we will help to even bring more attention to the country where LGBTI rights, which mean human rights, are not yet respected.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. I'm sure we'll all be following you and seeing how that goes. Thank you so much, Pavel. We're going to go to a second round for all the people listening and watching us. We're going to go to a second round now, briefer answers, and then we would like to open it up to questions that you might have, that the audience might have, to any of the panelists. So I'll start again with Igor. So we've heard a lot, Igor, you talked about it, and several of the speakers, Kristen also talked about it, this issue of allyship and having allies and creating a coalition that can help the LGBT, but any underrepresented community feel safe and be safe. So I would love to hear from you that, in your experience, from your perspective, what are some of the things that straight people can do and other people can do that are of deep value to create this safety, and also perhaps some of the things that we straight people take for granted. I know you did mention some of them, like, I don't have to keep what I do and my family life secret all day. If you could take that and answer that for us.
Thank you, Rose. Yes. All of us have spoken about the importance of allies for the creation of a safe zone, no matter what expression of diversity we're talking about. The thing is that we're all potentially an ally, all of us, even without knowing it, we all are. Why? Because we all need allies in other aspects of our life. But what many of us who are potential allies do ask ourselves is, why should I do it? What's in it for me? Why should I? What motivates me? And Pavel used the word motivation. Why should I spend my energy, credibility, my time to do something that is so obviously out of the mirror that I look at into the morning? And I think that this thing of asking ourselves questions that we have never asked ourselves of is the most important thing, because we will never look for answers if we don't ask ourselves the right questions. And the question here is, how can I, an ally, a straight person, do something to give the visibility and the voice to those who don't have it? How can I do that? And why should I do it? And not only to those who are in the closet, but also to those who have come out of the closet but still do not have the credibility that I have. So first, there are a few tips. We could speak for hours about that. Yeah. I have only 3 minutes. The language, the use of the proper language. And we know that the importance of the language is not in the mouth of who speaks it, but in the ear of who listens to it. Yeah. And then the language also has to be used in the proper way to communicate to the world that I am inclusive. Somebody who's in the closet has to understand that I'm inclusive. And maybe I will not ask them, well, are you gay? I saw you in Berlin at the airport kissing a man. No, but I will be able to communicate in a million ways that I'm an inclusive person. Because what we have to bear in mind is that there is a huge mountain which can turn into a sandcastle between being reserved, educated, I don't want to get into his or her privacy, and the perception by them that we're indifferent. It's so important. Privacy, being reserved, and seeming indifferent. And I'm sure that we all have diplomatic skills and language skills to overcome that mountain. Yeah. The second thing is we have to yell it out to the world that we are allies. We have to let other people know, those that who are not allies yet. We individually and we as companies, and my predecessors have spoken about the importance of communication. Then we know that there is always people who will not be comfortable with this whole proposition. And we who have become comfortable have the power. And if you have the power and the privilege, you have the responsibility to help those around us who still don't know why they should. We have to do that. And then, Rose, we have to take position. If we witness a situation where an injustice is being done, you know, the coffee machine in Italy, 9 o'clock Monday morning, coffee machine, what did you do over the weekend? I think we should once do a big monument to the coffee machine in every big square in every big city for what it means. If there is something that used to be said 3 years ago or even 3 days ago, but now it should not, and the gay person who is in the closet will never have the courage to say that, I have to speak out. They will tell me, Igor, but you said the same jokes 2 days ago. I said, yes, but I've learned in the meantime, and that will help you learn. And I'm sorry to have said it, but I've learned. And if we allies help all the others to learn and become aware, then we will be able to create a zone in which we all feel that we are involved. Because Rose, my last message is allyship. We are all involved. Only if you're all involved, we will be successful in our process of inclusion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rose.
Yeah. Thanks, Igor. As always, eloquently put, and very, very specific and useful tips, language, diplomacy, a lot, and this concept of not being a bystander, but being an upstander. When you see something, speak up because you have the voice. Just don't let it pass by. So thanks. I'd like to move to Fabrice on the same line of sort of what is happening, what are the kinds of things people can do. You know, our world is moving and changing so quickly, and everything evolves, and there's a projection, you know, that we're all moving along. And I would be interested to hear from you. Where do you see the trajectory of the evolutions to the LGBT movement and LGBT rights? How do you see this progressing? What's next? What is the sort of next issues that we should be bringing forward while we continue to grow the movement?
Well, thank you, Rose. I have to tell you, you know, it's pretty early in the morning for me because I tend to sleep late. And the only thing I remember from our panel this morning is that Igor said he kisses men at the airport in Berlin. You know, that's what I remember from his intervention. But back to the topic at hand, you know, I'm going to tell you something. I remember, I never managed to get married. I did point that out earlier in the segment in an attempt to use this platform to find a boyfriend. But I never managed to get married, but I did manage to get engaged, and briefly, and to the father of my children, actually. And you know, I went to see my family, and I said I'm engaged, and my sister-in-law, and you know, I complained that nobody congratulated me. And my sister-in-law said, she said, well, we've been very welcoming of your boyfriend and your sexual orientation. And she kind of implied, well, and now you want us to be happy that you're getting engaged, you know, what's next, you know? And to me, that was a wake-up call, right? Which is the understanding that the bar always gets higher until we reach full equality. And I think that's very important, is that, and you know, it's very important to remind it all the time. LGBTQ plus people do not want more. They do not want to use their sexual orientation or their gender identity to get an advantage. They want the exact same things as the rest of the population, which is to be respected, to have dignity, and to have an opportunity to a life of happiness, right? And so in many ways, the bar is always going to get higher. When countries reach a certain level, we are going to ask them to do more until we reach full equality. And I'll give you a very good example. You know, I had a huge, I'm kind of caught up in a big fight in the United States because there is a bill that is going to the House on board diversity, which is diversity in the boardroom, and it doesn't include LGBTQ plus people. Well, I'm going to tell you something. LGBTQ plus people are incredibly underrepresented in the boardroom. Companies have made huge progress on rank and file employees. Sometimes they even have made progress on the executive committee, right, or the senior management. But when you look at the boardroom in the United States, less than 0.2% of board seats in Fortune 500 companies are occupied by LGBTQ plus people. You know, that's kind of a sign of discrimination, which says, okay, I have no problem getting the homos, you know, in the company, but when it comes to where the decisions are taken, it's better if we keep it between the normies, right? And so now I'm going to go to battle when it comes to board diversity, because I will not stop and we will not stop until we get the exact same respect, dignity, and opportunity than the rest of the population, because who we love and our gender identity should not be ground for any discrimination. And so that's basically my message, Rose, is that unfortunately, the bar always get higher. And you know, if we have learned something in the United States, is that slavery, the end of slavery, was not the end of racial discrimination. And that's why we need to keep our eyes on the prize.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely, and we see this with, you know, with any diverse group or any group that doesn't have, that is underrepresented. There's always a curve. I want to go to Pavel now. Pavel, you've just heard Fabrice talking about representation on boards, and I know with small businesses it's a completely different game, because you don't have you know, boards. The more diverse a board can become, whether it's LGBT, whether it's women, whether it's cultural, whatever, the more diverse a board gets, the better the decision making can be for the entire organization. However, when it comes to small businesses, right, it's a different kettle of tea that we're playing with. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what are ways that small business owners are able to empower and evolve and uplift the LGBT community and their employees. And if you could give us some very specific examples, if you have them. Sure,
of course. And Rose, thank you actually for making this whole panel very inclusive, because you're not only talking about I don't know, the board level, but really the full spectrum of the business community. So also now the question about small businesses or even LGBTIQ entrepreneurs. I mean, what we often hear is that it's difficult to come out in business, or it's even impossible to come out in business. And I somehow subscribe to it, because I had my own experience, and through my experience, actually it took me until 2015 that I was somehow selectively hiding my sexual orientation. And so I fully understand this, how difficult it is. But once again, it's about a role model. So what we do at His Meets West, we try to once again to look at are there any examples who we can actually show as somebody who actually broke the glass ceiling. And there are actually examples. And if the fear is that the business community is fearing, I don't know, or the LGBTIQ businesses are fearing to lose credibility, lose customers, lose business partners, well, they need to be given a helping hand, right? Somebody needs to kind of help them at this stage. And there are different ways. One way is to give them opportunities. To give them opportunities means to invite them proactively when, I don't know, a company is sourcing for different goods and services. So to make them part of the supply chain, and even start asking the question, how diverse and how inclusive the corporate supply chain is. Are we procuring from, or are we buying from LGBTI community? Are we buying from women-owned businesses or people with disabilities? I think this is one angle. But it doesn't have to be linked only to the supply chain. it's also about supporting them in their business development. So giving them the opportunity to be mentored, coached, and really to grow as business people. When these things will be happening more often, then obviously there will be more role models coming up, and this will also then encourage all of the others to actually maybe less fear about the step of coming out in business.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, and we keep seeing this idea of creating the networks, creating the allies, that we're all very interdependent on each other wherever you are in the chain. And so with this, in the spirit of compare and contrast, I'd like to go back to a large organization and with the same question. So Christian, as you have a policy, an environment, a culture that is relatively ahead of the curve, if you will, compared to a lot of other countries, in making sure that your employees don't have to bring their armor to work, that they can be their authentic selves. How do you make sure you stay at this cutting edge, right? How do you make sure you're ahead of the curve? And do you have ways that help you monitor this or understand what the emerging issues are?
Yeah,
I don't know if you can say all of this in 3 minutes.
Well,
but
I'll try to not speak too quickly, because that's a little bit of my habits. So first of all, I want to recognize Pavel, because we were very pleased to be recognized by East Meets West for our supplier diversity program at the we're at the beginning. So Rose, you pointed out that we've done some work, we've done some good work, but it's a journey that continues, and we have a lot more work to do. But when we started our work at the very beginning, one of our external advisors, she very much, Patricia Bellinger, said, you only achieve what you measure. You need to set measurable goals and KPIs. Even if you're making progress, but you don't achieve all the way to the end result, because there is not really an end result. It's all about progress. It's not about perfection. So we set KPIs, and we have KPIs for inclusion that we measure, because you asked about measure. We measure versus with our employee survey that goes to all employees, factory workers, office workers, sales force. We do this globally, 8 languages, twice a year. And we have an inclusion index that's based from those results, which includes questions like, would someone with a different sexual orientation be equally valued in my work group? Would someone with a different ability equally valued? So we check that and see that those indices are improving. That's one thing that we do. We also have to be ahead of the curve. We need to make commitments in the community. So Barilla was the first Italian company to sign the UN Code of Conduct standards against LGBTQ discrimination in the workplace, because you have to be somewhat a role model. You need to be out there, putting your face out there. Yeah, this is not a spectator sport. We tell employees, this is not D&I is not a spectator sport. You need to get engaged. You need to get involved. Alexei mentioned the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Quality Index. That's another way to gauge, are we making improvements? So we started that in 2015. We applied, and it's a great organization that tells you what you're doing well and what you're not doing so well. We've applied ever since then and have 7 years in a row 100% rating from Corporate Equality Index. So again, it's a combination of asking your employees, seeing if you're making progress, setting measurable goals, and then checking and making commitments outside in the community, and valuing that. And then I'll give you last example. It's a qualitative example. We talked earlier about Safe Zone. So we had 2 years ago a very big event, ERG event, the value of being an ally. And Igor talked about allies as really driving change. And Igor was at the event, and one of our employees was talking about the value of being an ally as a voce. And he decided in front of 300 people in our headquarters to come out and basically to say that he was not an ally, he's a member of the community. And it was standing ovation, and what he said is, now I can spend my commuting time on a Monday morning, my 45 minutes when we used to go to the office, not figuring out the kind of stories I'm going to tell my coworkers about what I did on the weekend, but I'm going to be able to use that to solve problems that I'm going to face at work. So I think this is the main point, is if we make our environment safe where people can be authentic, they don't have to spend that time covering, and allies play a big role in opening up that environment. So I think, again, KPIs, external commitments, and then listening to your employees.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, we sometimes forget the sort of why it's good for organizations to make sure that all their employees fit in, because there's every single one of us has felt excluded in one way or the other for whatever the variety of reasons. And I think you're right. You know, today humans, well, always, our capacities, our brains, our thinking, our love, our commitment, those are the most prized assets of any company. So you want to be able to maximize that, because that is what's going to drive everybody forward. So thank you for that. I'd like to go to Alexei and continue this discussion of empowerment and creating the network, creating allies. I know you talked about your work in Russia and some of the work locally. Can you talk about how transferable is the work that you do in one country, for example, Russia, to other countries? Are you doing that? And what do you think are the key drivers for making this change, for building this network, for building the allyship?
Sure. Thank you, Rose, for the question. And absolutely, totally, it is transferable. And because people talk, right? That's what the network does. And that's what the power of the network is. And we hear quite often from our peers or our clients or our contacts or activists that, you know, quite often, like every global company has a policy, values, strategies, tons of papers. But then we keep hearing nothing going on, like no activities, no events, no visibility, etc., etc. Of course, it depends, and we're talking about safe zones. Like, for example, I appreciate that people like in Russia, for example, can feel safe in our office, but then when they leave the work and go out there, there's still this world waiting for them. So no one is really comfortable. But in terms of transferability, we thought, why wouldn't we, again, for example, in Russia, how we can transfer this from one company to another? We thought, why wouldn't we start some sort of a network, a platform where all the companies can meet and brainstorm and exchange best practices? And last year we hosted an event where we invited other law firms, other companies, lawyers, activists, everybody, local companies, international companies, just to get together and give it a thought. How can we do this? I did this. I had this challenge. I found the solution for this, etc., etc. The network does. And then we decided, why don't we do this on a regular basis? So, for example, who are listening to us and who has offices in Russia, in Moscow, this year we'll have another event like this. So if you're interested, I can just reach out to me. I can extend an invitation for this event, because we will brainstorm again. We'll get legal updates, and there will be training, free training for HR company, or for HR personnel, or everybody, managers who would like to learn how to advance this topic in Russia, for example. We had the same conversation with India, for example. Microsoft, with whom we did an event, they reached out to us and said, you know what, we heard you did this in Russia. Do you think we can do same kind of thing in India? And we sat together and brainstormed about this. So this is really very empowering, I think. So to answer your question, yes, it's totally transferable, and I think it should be transferable. And we don't have to invent the wheel every time we go, because it's out there. And some companies don't have role models. Some companies have this issue. Some companies, I don't know how to start. They sit there ready to go, but they just don't know how to begin, where to begin, with what, etc., etc. So I think what we're trying to do is very good, and I just sure that we can all learn from each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think one thing, you know, that's coming clear is this opportunity to share with each other, to create the allies. I mean, it's these themes that keep coming up, and so I would like to bring it back to where we began with Doris, because Doris, as you said, this journey is pretty new to you, and we've had a lot of ideas. You've heard from a broad spectrum of people on ideas, challenges. So for the people who are listening out there, or who are also starting their journey, what advice would you have for them? How would you start up? And what kinds of things are top of your mind right now, today, with the program, particularly in light of what we've heard? And of course, all of that in 3 minutes.
That's quite challenging, Rose. I would say, first of all, big thank you to all the panels, the speakers today, because I'm learning so much. And this is also one of the reasons why we wanted to host this conversation at Generali. If I have to think, we are only at the beginning of the journey, but I am quite happy to say that we have done a lot in less than 1 year. So probably, I'm the last person who can give advice, but I can say what worked for us. I think there were 3 main elements for success in our case when it comes to LGBT inclusion. The first one is listening the voices of the employees, and many people here today referred to that, and that's what the ERGs are about. That's what allyship is about. In our case at Generali, the voices were the voices of the diversity and inclusion community of practice, which really brought together people from different nationalities, but with one thing in common, which is the passion for diversity and inclusion. So, that was key. So listening to their voices, listening to their needs, and understanding what's going on, because they really tell you, right, what the company should do about diversity and inclusion. You don't need to reach that far. So that's number one. The second one is, as a diversity and inclusion team, I think that our role was that of bridging the voices of the employees with the governance. Sometimes these two things in companies tend to take different paths. It was really very important to create that bridge so that we were able to bring the input of what our allies, our employees were saying into the strategic plan that we drafted afterwards and implemented. And the third thing is, again, I will repeat it, but I heard Kristen say the same thing. You need to measure, you need to have a strategic approach at the end of the day, because if you commit to something, you also have to implement it, right? You have to be accountable for this. And in this case, I must say that I'm very happy about how we are going about this at Generali, because we are working on 6 different streams, but the streams are championed both by the leaders and by the LGBT people themselves, or the LGBT allies. So by people who really put their time, their effort, their energy to make it actionable, to make it real. I'd like to spend just 30 minutes saying a big thank you to our, group ERG. Which is called We Proud, by the way, and to the fantastic moderators that are doing a fantastic job in order to keep raising awareness. Because, as Igor said, and as Kirsten said, as all the speakers today said, you must never give up, right? That is something that needs to be nurtured, needs to continue always. And so they do a fantastic job. So I want to thank Natalia, Cesare, and Tiziano for their great job. And we hear fantastic stories in the We Proud community, which was born with about 100 people last October, and now has raised to more than 850 people. So it's really a big accomplishment, and I'm very grateful to them for what they do. We hear stories that echo a lot with what I've heard today. We hear stories of, for example, transgender colleagues who have been welcomed positively by the company, even if there is no policy. So again, it's a question of culture. We have heard stories of people who, were LGBT colleagues who were born and raised in Russia. So they face the challenges that were mentioned by Alexei before. We hear stories of countries which are in Eastern Europe who, have got certain challenges that were mentioned before by the other speakers in this panel, but which are, for example, have got policies that cover same-sex couples. So, there are a lot of positive stories to be shared and to really, leverage on. And this is what we want to keep doing, to leverage on these stories, to keep really promoting and fostering an inclusive environment. Back to you, Rose.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. So we have some time for a couple of questions before we close. I see that there's a question that's been asked and answered on the chat by Kristen, but if I could just ask it again with a little bit of a twist, and the question here is, another American in Italy, I 100% agree that senior leadership must be invested for anything to happen. And my question is, why does very Italian family company become disinvested in this issue? If I could just put a little twist to it, because I know that you have answered on the chat, so anybody could read that. But, you know, we've talked about senior leadership a lot. Do you have experience on, and Barilla is very lucky to have the very visible and active participation of the senior leadership. Have you ever, what happens if that is not there?
No, it's a good twist, Rose. Thanks. No, because I talked to a lot of other chief diversity officers who say, you know, my function is within HR or within marketing or within another function, and I don't have that reporting structure and that commitment. So how do I get that commitment? One of the things I suggest is that, you know, try to engage find those passionate champion senior leaders, because there will be some, and engage them in speaking about D&I and why it's important. Engage them as role models, or men as allies for gender diversity, men as straight allies for LGBT inclusion. And then one other thing that really helped us is getting each of our ERGs elected a executive sponsor. So we have a we have a chartering process for the ERGs, because if not, you can have lots of them and they don't, not really kind of focused. So we have a charting process. They need to have co-leaders, and they need to pick an executive sponsor. And the executive sponsor then is engaged in that ERG, which is basically engaged in D&I. So you can, that's another good way to get very senior executive, senior leadership to your work through multiple levers. So don't just say that it has to be through a reporting structure, which is my benefit, but it could be through, champions, role modeling, and then also executive sponsorship of your ally groups.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. We have a question also here for Doris. Doris, do you think it's possible to release or to have a local course, mandatory course, I guess local CEOs and senior leaders might take, because it's very frustrating to see how the younger or unbiased generation of the companies hitting an invisible roof. I'm not sure I agree with the unbiased, I agree with the younger, but it is true, right? Perhaps there's more openness or familiarity, and sometimes there's a disconnect. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Rose, and thanks for the question. I agree with you. There is no such thing as an unbiased person. Definitely, when we talk about the younger generations, obviously they are more open to certain topics, but still we all bring our biases with us, and we need to challenge our own biases, first of all, to see also the others. Yes, when it comes to leadership, we at group level, we are working on, we have group leadership development programs, and we are making sure that there is always one chapter on diversity and inclusion included in it. So, we give it the twist that we want, obviously, but it has to be included in all our development programs for leaderships, and not just for leadership and for management. So we are definitely working into that direction, and we actually started in 2018, to raise awareness on biases. But we keep doing it. As we said before, it's a journey. It really takes time, and it really takes commitment. So we are committed to make it happen, and we do bring these topics also on the leadership table.
Okay, great. So I have a question here for Igor. Igor, you pointed out the importance of answering the question, what's in it for me, when you talk about allies. Any strategies that you can use or suggest to make the LGBT communities and initiative attractive for most of the employees in the company to foster building up an inclusive culture? And to that, I just want to send an email that I got from somebody this is actually from my website, so I'm not sure where this comes from, but it says, "Hi, I am a straight male. I am not gay. I don't know what I feel about LGBT, but I'm not mean. When I ask people, they tell me I have to do my own homework. So I don't know how to find out more." So
right, Rose. Thank you for addressing the question to me, and thank you for who asked the question. It is a very important thing. I said, what's in it for me? We said that inclusion is a learning process. I need to understand what people need, and they need things on the basis of who they are. And if I don't know them, if for me they live on a different planet, how do I get in touch with them? So I think one of the most important things is for a safe zone in a workplace to allow for, in this case, LGBT plus people to come out and tell us about themselves. Because in this way, if I always thought that a trans person, and that is what people often think, maybe perhaps a sex worker on a big boulevard in the city, and I see a transgender woman engineer or a man architect, my stereotypes are much more likely to drop down, to disappear, because I do have an experience for the first time. And how can I think something different of a person of whom I thought all the best as a professional until yesterday? How can I? So the best way, stereotypes stem from our life experiences, from what we've been through, what we've seen, we've heard, but very often stereotypes and bias stems from what we have not seen and not been through. So if my organization puts me in a condition to see and hear what I have not in the past, that's a step forward. And what's in it for me? Well, I do see myself as a straight man in the mirror, but I may have gay colleagues and lesbian colleagues, and if they feel better, I will feel better. And then, those of us who are parents or who plan to be parents in the future, given all the numbers and statistics, we need to be aware that perhaps one day our son at the age of 14 will come to us and will say, "Daddy, let me tell you something." And he might tell me something that I never expected. The fact that he likes a boy, not a girl. And as a parent, I'm not prepared because my life has not brought me to be prepared. On the other side, many of us deal with customers, and the customers are nothing but the intersection of the society. And if I'm a partner in a big firm and every Friday I meet for lunch with my counterpart in my client firm, and I always had as my lunch partner somebody who is like my reflection in the mirror. And one day, instead of him, I see a transgender woman that the client company has decided to appoint to the job. I don't know what to do. I'm lost. I cannot do my job. So if we think, we will find that there is a reason for each and every one of us to be involved, because we will gain awareness, knowledge, and we'll be able to be better as professionals and be free. I, a gay man, will be free of fears. I, a straight man, will be free of my bias and stereotypes, which are a filter with which I see the world. And let's just change the filters.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry if it was a long answer.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. We actually have another question for both Pavel and Igor, if you want to look at it on the chat, because we do need to go to the closing. We are out of time. So I thank everybody for being here on behalf of Diversity Magazine. Check out the magazine. Thank you so much to all the panelists. It has been it has been an honor hearing all the different perspectives and hearing the wealth of knowledge and the level of passion and commitment every one of you brings. And it's one brick at a time that we build this road forward. So thank you very much. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Kenny, who will close this event for us.
So Rose and everyone, what a session. Big round of applause to everyone, really. I really appreciate the session that we have today. I mean, it's really inspiring, it's energizing, it's real life. And I think everyone has shared what you all been through to really, fight for the LGBT. And I'm pretty sure today that everyone who participate are being inspired by this. And I'm sure pretty much that everyone will take what they learned today and try to really, promote the agenda in their own community. One thing that I learned also, or being reminded today, that the road to create the safe zone is not rosy at all. And I don't think that in Generali it will not be that rosy either. But I think it would take a lot of perseverance. It take a lot of persistence that we need to continue to our effort to develop our journey and put the effort in there. And then we will see the progress of it. And the other important point that I got reminded many times today, that it's not just about LGBT people. It's about everyone. It's about creating more allyship. It's about making the uncomfortable people being more comfortable and create that safe zone together. So, I mean, personally, I'm super inspired. Personally, also, I learned a certain tip that I can bring it back to my organization. And so I really want to really call for actions for everyone participating in the session, that please, if you are inspired, go out and invite more allies. Go out and make it comfortable for people to really help create the safe zone inside Generali together. And that's I think all the panelists today who devote their time sharing all the experience with us will be very happy that their effort has bring out the greater fruits in the future. So that's it from me, and I really appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night, good morning, have a great day wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Arrivederci.
Ciao, ciao, arrivederci.